Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
What's up, Knight fans, and welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. We're back after our holiday break and ready for 2017. Happy New Year. Hope you had a great holiday. My name is Jeff Sharon, and along with me is Eric Lopez.
Jeffrey, it's good to be back. I'm relieved. I don't know what I just witnessed, but I'm glad to be back.
What happened to you over the break?
I just watched UCF. I mean, as we record this, we just watched UCF East Carolina basketball, and I'm still trying to digest that, which was not easy.
Oh yeah, that was not a very fun way of ending the break. I actually go back into where I was in work on Monday, but like apparently nobody else was, and so I go back again tomorrow because I work from home on Tuesdays. But yeah, I watched that whole game on TV, and I was glad that I was teaching. I had it on mute as I was teaching one of my classes, and it was bad. It was bad. But a win is a win is a win, right? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about women's basketball and their game against UConn this past week, which I did PA at. Had a front row seat for the UConn Huskies, and oh my God, are they good? We will talk about tennis.
You just figured that out, huh?
Yeah.
Breaking news.
Breaking news here on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. UConn is good at women's basketball. We'll talk about the bowl games. Obviously, the last time you heard from us was our post-game show after the Cure Bowl. Boy, I almost forgot what it was called since I almost put it out of my mind.
I think many Knight fans feel the same way as you do. They put it behind them and forgotten about it.
It's basketball season now. Moving on. And we'll talk about a couple other things having to do. We have one more college football game left in the season. It's the championship game and a couple of UCF connections to Alabama and Clemson. So don't forget to follow us on Twitter if you don't already at UCF_Banneret. I am at Jeff_Sharon. Eric is at Eric Lopez Elo. We are also on Facebook at Black and Gold Banneret. And if you go to blackandgoldbanneret.com, you can subscribe to our site via email. We got some new stuff coming up this week. And you can also subscribe to this podcast on, let's see if I can remember this after a while, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and just recently added on TuneIn Radio. So if you subscribe to any of those services, you can subscribe to our podcast. Please do. Please leave us a rating. Tell us how we're doing. And give us a good rating if you can. And if you don't think we're doing all that good, then we're the Nightline podcast. So how about that? By the way, programming note. No, I mean that. I mean that. Serious programming note. This Sunday, January the 8th, I, Eric Lopez, will be joining the Nightline podcast with Trace Trilko and Andrew Fegley. And Eric Kohler will also be there. And we'll be doing a live YouTube special January 8th at, I believe it's 7 p.m., but I'll double-check that for you. Here it is, Sunday at 7 p.m. So I'm excited about that, and that should be fun. So
now, did you negotiate with Andrew Fegley about the television, making sure that's on the Giants-Packers game, as that'll be going on while you're on the air as a Giants fan that you are?
I will be, if not, I will be eating up his bandwidth by streaming it on Sling TV. So you heard me, Andrew. We need to have that game on. All right. So let's go. All right, let's dive in. Let's get started. And we'll talk about football season's in the bag, so it's basketball season. And the Knights on the men's side, I'll tell you, the roll just kind of continues, and they've been really workmanlike this season. I think they've surprised everyone. Currently standing at 11-3, and we're recording this on Tuesday night, January 3rd, coming off of a really ugly win against East Carolina. 48-45 was the final in a bizarre sort of back and forth game. Started out really poorly for UCF. Fell down early. I think it was 6-0, and then we were down 7-0 at one point, and then went on a run. And I'm actually trying to pull up the run right here. We were up at one point 20-12 or 21-13. So if you're looking at it, that's a 21-6 run, and kind of kept ECU at arm's length. Then ECU kind of fought back. They actually had a shot to tie the game at the buzzer, but missed. And that was it. B.J. Tyson had a shot to tie it, but couldn't come up with it. As far as the team stats are concerned, field goal percentage is just horrendous. Both teams shot 26% from the field. The Knights shot 28 free throws and made 21 of them. I think that was pretty much the difference in the game. ECU was 6 of 16 at the line. The Knights out-rebounded ECU by 8, 46-38. Leading scorers for the Knights, I'm actually pulling this up right now. I mean, nobody was really playing particularly well in this game. 3 Knights in double. Only 5 Knights actually put up points in this game. But B.J. Taylor came back after exactly a month away from his injury. 4 of 10 from the field, but 10 of 12 at the line. Finished with 19 points.
Hit a big three late, too, when it looked like the game was slipping away. Hit a big three to keep that kind of arm's length against East Carolina, too, when the shot clock was running,
and
which I thought was huge.
Yeah, that was a huge play in the game that could kind of be considered the shot that really maybe put it out of reach. Matt Williams did not shoot very well, 3 of 10, 2 of 8 from the arc, but had 13 points. And Chad Brown was 4 for 4 from the field, 11 points. Taco Fall had missed, I think, 5 shots in his previous 3 games or something like that. He was 0 for 6 from the field. And and Washington, the center for ECU, got to give him credit because he played excellent defense that night. Actually blocked Taco, I think, a couple times. Washington wasn't all that good himself from the field, 1 of 6. ECU's leading scorer was Barkley, who was 6 of 19 from the field for 16 points. But ugly or not, man, UCF is now, I think, 12-3 and 3-0 in the league, and you got to give Johnny Dawkins credit, man. He has found the rotation. They have been healthy to this point. They have played well. They rebound. The defense, I think, Eric, has been the real difference for this team. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the top defensive teams in the country. Statistically, has proven that, and that's what won them the game today. One of the issues when you're shorthanded like UCF is from a scholarship player standpoint, we've documented this very much. They don't have a lot of depth. Well, what that means is you're pretty much dependent on the same guys every night. And when they have an off night, there's really nobody else you could turn to. And I think that's what you saw from an offensive standpoint today. Taco Fall was due for, was his first, quote, bad game offensively he's had all season. Matt Williams had a cold day shooting. And I was worried about this game since the late second half of the Temple game. Because, it's funny. If we would have done this podcast right after the Temple game, our tone would be completely parade. Because I said this, I may have even tweeted this out. I think the Temple win on Saturday, it's the biggest win this program has had since the Florida game at the Amway Center in Donnie Jones's first season.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, this Temple team that UCF absolutely crushed them. is a team that was a 29 RPI coming in, had beaten Florida State and West Virginia, 2 top 25 teams in the country. So in other words, that's one of the better teams that UCF has beaten in a while, and they dominated them without B.J. Taylor. And that was an impressive win, and that was a win. There was like, wow, what can this team do? But then I was worried, you got East Carolina on a Tuesday night, after everybody's patting you on the back, it's got letdown written all over it, because you're like, oh boy. And it was. I felt there was a bit of a letdown. As good as they played, as good as Matt Williams played against Temple, they did. But the good news about this team is the one thing that's been consistent is they know how to defend. And the positive about that moving forward is as long as this team can defend, they're going to have chances to be in every game. But I think offensively, Jeff, this won't be the last time we talk about them having an off night because they just don't have enough bodies. And, you're just going to have off nights. But I really think the B.J. Taylor return, which was a surprise. A lot of people I talked to after the Temple game didn't think that he would return tonight for this East Carolina game. They thought maybe the Connecticut game on the road, maybe. But it turns out he did. And I thought it was huge because I don't think without him, I don't think they hold on to win this game.
Yeah, right now UCF is first in the American in scoring defense. They're averaging giving up just 57.1 points a game. That's coming into tonight's action. And they were tops in field goal percentage defense. Teams are shooting just 32% against them. And they have defended the arc extremely well. Teams are shooting under 28% from three-point range. So we talked about, how important the three-pointer is in today's college game. Well, they're getting out and closing out. And the defense has been and also here's the other thing that I really like. Tops in the league in rebounding margin, plus 13.3 a game. A lot of that is Taco, but it's not a one-man show. He's had some help from the other guys, the other fours around him. So credit to Johnny Dawkins. The schedule looks like this going forward for men's basketball.
They're going to UConn, my friend.
At UConn on Sunday. That game's on CBS Sports Network. It's also at Hartford. Then you come back home. So this is kind of weird. You got almost a week off, 6 days off. Then you're back home for Houston, January 14th. That's a Saturday. And then USF comes in 3 days after that, Tuesday, January 17th. So this right here is, and then after that, by the way, Sunday, January 22nd at Memphis. So this is a big 4-game stretch in conference. And, we talked about, how this is conference play now. Every game is big. Well, it gets big in a hurry right off the top here. And you're 3-0 in the league with 2 home wins. And you got these 4 games coming up. It's going to be, 2 tough road games in there at Memphis, at UConn, probably 2 of the toughest road games you're going to find on the conference schedule. But and then you got a couple rivals coming in to home. But, if they continue to play well and they continue to defend, there's no reason why this team should not get to 20 wins rather easily, I think. And then when you get to 20, now you're talking postseason. And then it's a matter of what you do in the conference tournament that can get you into the NCAAs, maybe as an at-large.
Well, I don't want to go that direction just yet, although I can tell you I just checked the real-time RPI, because I am an RPI geek. I love RPI, to some extent anyway. I can tell you that UCF is currently a 59 RPI. At this recording, they're 59 RPI, which is the third best in the American Conference. Yeah, Temple's at 37. You got Cincinnati and SMU. So they're actually the 4th best RPI team in the conference. It's early. Let's not get carried away with that. I think the word I have used to this point is postseason basketball team. I think this team has a shot to be a postseason basketball team. Are they? I think it's way too early to discuss NCAAs and see what happens with this roster. But I think this team can be a postseason basketball team. And when I say postseason, I'm talking, maybe hopefully NCAA, but also NIT or CBI. And that's not a bad thing considering where this program has been, Jeff.
Yep.
The last couple of years and what the expectations was this season. I think everybody, the majority of the fan base, I would say, and maybe people outside the program before the year said this was a throwaway year for Johnny Dawkins because most of his players that are going to make impact are sitting out because they'll be eligible next year from a transferring standpoint or just recruits or whatever. So the fact that we're even having this discussion, I mean, this team has bought into him big time. And he has done a great job making these players succeed in high positions. You mentioned the defensive numbers. One of the reasons why they're such a good defensive team is because Taco Fall has been able to stay on the floor. He's averaging over 30 minutes a game compared to about 15 last year. And he's staying out of foul trouble. He's in better condition, and he's a better player. And so Coach Dawkins, knowing that, like, you're going to take care of the inside game. Nobody can score inside of you because of your size. So we got to focus on guarding the perimeter because that's the only way teams are going to, they're going to focus on that. And we're going to force them to drive because we've got that taken care of. And then you look at Taco Fall from a defensive standpoint and Matt Williams this season, they're playing it at all conference level. Matt Williams has been playing it at all conference level, which blows me away. And that is an amazing story. A kid who's been injury prone at UCF, was primary just a shooter. It looked like he had was going to leave the program. He was going to transfer to Wake Forest, but a credit to Dawkins, he kept the door open. He let him practice on campus, even though he was out the door to Wake Forest. And as I understand it, the two of them got to know each other. And I think, Matt Williams changed his mind. And I think it was the best decision for him. And it's been the best decision for UCF. So I'm amazed with this team. And how can you not root for this team? I mean, this team is the underdog team. I mean, they're shorthanded. They've got their flaws. Don't get me wrong. But, man, it's just been remarkable, and I hope that people catch on to it. And that's why it's great to start off 2-0, and so far the year that they've started has been tremendous.
This team reminds me a lot of the team that was in my senior year, which was 04-05. It was actually the year after they won the first of the back-to-back ASUN championships. And they had lost Dexter Lyons. They had lost a couple of players to graduation that were real key players. And you thought that they had lost their explosiveness and their mojo a little bit. But they were a really scrappy team that, again, like this one, relied on defense and rebounding. And, again, that was an easy team to root for because their primary guy was Gary Johnson, who was a pretty good point guard, but I mean, no one would say that this guy was like a team leading super mega star at all. He was just a very, very highly serviceable player and really one of the true UCF greats. But but he played, I think, with the same kind of energy that we see from B.J. Taylor in terms of both offense and defense. You mentioned Matt Williams, who's been great. Matt, by the way, is shooting 38% from outside the arc. Anytime you're over 35%, you're shooting great. Matt's over 38%, and that's coming into tonight. May have dropped a little bit.
But the big thing with him is he's become a scorer, which I never thought he would be. I thought he was more just a shooter. Maybe I know Donnie Jones tried to use him at the point at times, but he's become a go-to guy, and because they've had no choice. That's the thing. You don't have other options. So in a way, I feel like some of these players maybe are playing with more confidence because they know that there's not a quick hook that, we need you. We're dependent on you. Now, unfortunately, like you're going to have nights like, the East Carolina game where you're going to it's just not going to work out and you don't have other options and you're not going to, score well.
But they won the game anyway.
And that's the big thing. And that's why playing defense is huge.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say that, sorry. But I was going to say that the big thing that they showed me tonight was they could play poorly and win. And that's the sign of a really good team, when you figure out a way to win when you're not playing your best.
Now, look, I'm sure Coach Dawkins is not happy how that game ended. They were sloppy, some careless passes. I think they had over 20 turnovers in the game. So it wasn't pretty because they really made things difficult on themselves late in that game. They had that game kind of in control. I think they're up 17 at one point. late in the second half there, and they kind of let East Carolina back in. So they got some work to do, but I'm just happy they won. Look, East Carolina's been a team that's given UCF fits with Jeff Lebo, all right? I mean, so I think you take the win, you move on, and I think that's that kind of year. I don't think this is a year where you nitpick victories or stuff like that because, I'm just amazed that we're even at this point. And you just hope you're happy that B.J. Taylor is back. I think you just get some of the rust off, and I think they'll kind of reconnect a little bit. And I think – one of the positives that is going to come out of this, you have the kid Lang that had to play minutes because they didn't have a choice. Now he's got some minutes. Now he's a kid that maybe you play him a few minutes coming off the bench eventually when you do bring back B.J. Taylor into the starting lineup. So in a way, you've kind of created some depth out of necessity because you didn't have a choice with a kid that only came to UCF trying to be a grad assistant because he wants to go into coaching. So
right.
It's just kind of wild, man. I'm just blown away by this team. But it's been entertaining to watch, and it's been more interesting to watch than I expected. And like you said, it's tricky because they go to UConn, who's been a disappointment this year. They've had their issues with injuries, but it's still UConn. So I don't expect that to be easy. That's a tricky game. And then Houston's playing very well. The reason I mentioned earlier, I don't like talking postseason. I don't want people to all of a sudden set themselves up if things don't work out, because I still think this has been all positive. So if they make postseason, they don't make postseason, it is what it is. Let's not forget what we thought about this team in October, considering all the issues they have on the roster, and not change the expectations because they're off to a good start. I don't think if this team somehow does not make postseason, I don't think that should be all of a sudden, oh, what a disappointment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm worried about. So I don't want people to get caught up in postseason talk this early because it's still very early in the conference.
You're trying to temper my expectations, Lopez.
You and a lot of Knight fans, because my concern is with the lack of depth, with the scholarships, is this team going to be able to hold up through a conference schedule, which is never easy. It's not easy if you have depth, let alone if you don't. So that's why I just want to wait a little bit longer before we mention that word that you brought up earlier, that 4-letter word.
Well, I'm going to remain optimistic because I'm ever the optimist, by the way. So,
fair enough.
One other thing that I want to mention, Taco Fall, coming into tonight, was 84% from the field, 92 of 109. He is now 0 for 6 tonight. He's 92 of 115. Coming into tonight, he was leading the nation in field goal percentages, 84%. He was 3 percentage points ahead of Devontae Kasak of, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if I messed that up, of UNC Wilmington, who is shooting 81% from the field, 86 of 106. So we'll have to double check the stats after tonight. But Taco, among the nation's leaders in field goal percentage, obviously something that we're going to keep an eye on. Now let's talk a little shift gears, talk a little women's basketball, because all the hoopla around men's basketball. Guess what? Coach Abe and this women's team, they're off to, like we said, we've said it before on this show, but it bears repeating. That's a good start. Currently at 10-4, having dropped their home conference opener against the UConn Huskies, the number 1 team in the country, and basically a WNBA team on New Year's Day. I was there for that game, and for the game prior to that, the UC Davis game. So the Knights lost by 6 in that game against a pretty good UC Davis team. I think it's going to be out on the West Coast. But UCF right now stands at, like I said, 10-4. You kind of have to. So they play UConn twice this year, right? And
no, they only get them once.
They only get them once. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They only get them once. That's how the schedule worked out this year.
That's a good thing.
And yeah, well, certainly considering what we saw on New Year's Day, UConn jumped out. I think it was 37-6 at one point, and kind of it was 24-6 at the end of one. They were shooting 82%. We were shooting 18 after one, and that was pretty much it. 84-48 was the final. But some takeaways from this game for UCF. Even though UConn shot 63% from the field, UCF forced them into a season-high 21 turnovers. And actually, I heard from Coach Abe after the game, and she talked about how, people were like, well, you only scored 6 points in the first quarter. At least on our side, on offense, that was by design.
I did not want to give him the ball. I did not want to give him the ball and shoot the ball quick. So we were trying to get it down all the way to the shot clock, honestly. And so just to choke the game a little bit. Obviously, that's why we had 6 points in the first half. We needed to do a better job defensively, but we were trying not to give them the ball. You can't just go out and play against UConn. Nobody can. You're going to lose by 500 points. So we were really trying to slow the game down, bore them a little bit. And, they play man. We got them into a zone. So love it. So and they press, and they never press. So all of it was good. So they were pressing to try to turn us over so they can get the ball back so they can score. So they were doing different things that they never do. Our players don't know that, but I know that all they ever play is man, and they really get after you. And so because they weren't, stealing the ball, getting turnovers, all that stuff in their half-court defense, they were forced to press and they were forced to go zone against us. So, that's a little miracle in itself, too.
Now, on the other side, Gino Auriemma, obviously one of the greatest coaches of all time, was complimentary of UCF. He said that, this team is a lot more aggressive this year, particularly on the defensive end. And they were also, and that, like we said, forcing the turnovers. Gino will say, that, well, we should never have been forced into said turnovers if we do our job. But he did mention that this team was, that UCF, like we said, was a lot more aggressive this time around than they have been in the past. And forcing, that many turnovers, they tried to slow the game down. And I think that's what you have to do. Both coaches said that's, if you're going to stand any chance against UConn, you have to take the air out of the ball. And so we saw UCF. There were times when it seemed like they were running the shot clock down because they couldn't find a good look. That wasn't the case at all, as Coach Abe said. They were trying to run as much shot clock as possible in order to prevent from getting into a up and down, because if you do that against UConn, well, the game, they're going to score 150 points on you and beat you by 125. But credit to the Knights for, at least, trying to execute as best as they could. Leading scorer for UCF in the game is Aaliyah Gregory, who I thought played a pretty good game. Took the ball to the hole, played strong on defense, 18 points. Zai Lewis was 7 of 19 from the field for 15 points. Only 1 of 7 from three-point range. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how good UConn is, because they're really good. They shot 16 of 22 in the first half. All of their players, first of all, they have wingspan for days. Like when they get back on defense and they all put their arms out as UCF is bringing the ball up the court, I don't know how you get the ball in between them. They're so good. All the players look like they are they're cast out of the mold for whatever position that they're playing. And Gabby Williams missed only 1 shot. She was 6 of 7. Nafisa Collier missed only 1 shot. She was 10 of 11. Katie Lou Samuelson, I thought, was the best player that they had out there on the floor, and she was a remarkable inside-outside player. You think that she's going to be, cleaning up the boards inside, then she steps outside and starts shooting threes on you. She was 3 of 8 from three-point range for 17 points total, and 7 rebounds. So I was really impressed with UConn in a year that, of course, they're number one. They're the unanimous number one. They're undefeated. They're not going to, the only team that can beat them is them, but they don't have a superstar. They don't have a player.
Well, they don't have a superstar until they go to the WNBA and you find out they have like 3-4 lottery picks.
Well, they don't. Well, yeah, because they're UConn, but they don't have somebody who's like Diana Taurasi. They don't have a Nikesha Sales, who's on our was on our assistant coaching staff, and and Coach Doriema talked about her before the
No,
game.
they're right. They're very talented. They don't have that one person that's dependent. There's 3 or 4 people that can beat you on any given moment, and they're very well rounded. And they believe in the team basketball concept.
And you can see that with everything that they do on the floor. It's completely selfless.
So let me ask you, what was the crowd like? Because I heard what was the attendance? I know there was a lot of UConn fans, so it's obviously they travel, which I know. I've seen their men's and women's they travel. UConn, and I've been up there to stores. They are a basketball school and then some. So,
well, the official attendance was 45-39. From where I was standing, I thought it was closer to like about 3,750, like 3,750, 3,800. It was. I'm not going to lie. It was mostly UConn fans,
sure.
Or at least it sounded like that. They were quite loud.
Credit
to them because
right.
I think easy for us to forget. Now you say well they travel well, but it's not so much that they travel. We forget UConn's a big school up in the Northeast, and a lot of folks are up in the Northeast, and they come down here to Florida. There were a lot of, I'm sure, University of Connecticut alumni. Who make their home here in Central Florida, who saw that UConn was on the schedule, and they came down to the game, and they saw us play, and to see their Huskies. And, good for them.
Well, and also keep in mind, Jeff, that UConn's that team in women's basketball that the casual fan's going to go want to see, right? I mean, that's like, I want to go see UConn. Kind of like people used to go see Michael Jordan or see LeBron James now or see the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. You want to see that?
Maybe, but I would feel more confident saying that if they had a superstar player like a Diana Taurasi still on the roster, which they did not have this year.
Yeah, but I think the college game, I think Gino's the draw. I mean, people know who Gino Auriemma is. He's recognizable. I mean, let's not forget he's led the U.S. women's national team to gold medals in the Olympics. So, I think he's the draw, and then UConn, the brand, is the draw. So, there's people that want to see UConn. If you're into women's basketball, that's who you want to see. So I think that's a part of it. The bigger issue now moving forward for UCF is how do they respond after playing UConn? Because I don't know, there's no real, you know what's going to happen there. The question is, do you get better moving forward, and do you avoid letdowns? Do you avoid UConn beating you? How does this team respond after that huge game? Because let's be honest, every player, you're geeked up to play UConn. Do you bring the same intensity and excitement now going on the road to Cincinnati? And then you host Memphis. How will this team respond? I think will be fascinating moving forward after playing UConn. To me, that's where we're going to learn more about this team, don't you?
Well, yeah, but I think that one of the advantages that they have is the fact that they got this game out of the way early. I mean, if you face a team like UConn in your home opener in conference, in your first conference game, you're not going to see them again the rest of the year. Everything else, by comparison, is a lot different. So like you said, at Cincinnati next on January the 4th. That's tomorrow. We're taping this on, again, Tuesday, January 3rd. Then they're home for Memphis on the 7th. That's a Saturday on UCFnights.tv. Then they got at Houston, at East Carolina, home Tulsa, home Cincinnati, following that. So I think that it benefits them to get that game out of the way early. So it's like, okay, we ran the gauntlet. We got through there. We learned a couple things about ourselves. We'll be, now we can see what the rest of the competition looks like by comparison. And so I think that was an advantage. Couldn't have worked out better for Coach Abe. And I got to give Coach Abe a lot of credit because, she's realistic about the situation. And I think you kind of heard it in the sound that we played a little earlier. For God's sake, they're UConn, right? So do what you can do best against them to sort of control. It's kind of like she can't say this obviously, but it's kind of like you're in damage control the entire time against them. Unless they have a really bad night, they're going to beat you. So mitigate the damage as much as possible. Play your game. Try and force them to play your game to whatever extent that they'll do it, and at least try and expose your players to the kind of competition that they're seeing and put them in positions to have little wins like she talked about, breaking the game down into 5-minute segments and seeing if you can win those 5-minute segments. I thought in the second half we actually played relatively well. I thought that we played fairly strong. Now, how much of that was UConn kind of maybe I don't know if they took their foot off the gas or if they were just, more or less using that as an experiment to try certain things. But I got to give Coach Abe credit because she was realistic. I think if I was one of her players, I would come out of that game with more confidence than I did going into it because of, sure, they beat us, but you know what? We forced 21 turnovers on them. We kind of gave them a little bit. We kind of gave them a little bit of trouble on the defensive end. And yeah, we played them, but you know what? They're human too. Poke them and they bleed a little bit, right? So I was pretty encouraged by that. But you're right. I do want to see now how this team responds in these next couple games.
We'll see what happens. Should be interesting. Cincinnati, they're playing, is a team that's coming off a loss on the road at SMU, so this will be their home opener. So it'll be interesting how they respond. And then they host Memphis on a Saturday at home. So we'll see what happens. I'm very interested to see how they respond the next couple of games. Because now, really for the first time, not that, I don't know if adversity is a strong word, but you've lost a couple games in a row now.
A little bit of a low point. A little bit of a low point, right?
And that's the thing because, for a lot of these players, they've gone through a lot of losing. And now the first time it's a couple losses. So, you hope, that you avoid going like, oh, here we go. This is where it kind of starts slipping away, type of deal. So I'm very interested to see how they come out here in the next couple of games because you don't want is UConn to beat you twice. And when I say that, I mean, sometimes a UConn can beat you so bad that you kind of lose confidence and you lose the next game because of that. That's the thing you want to avoid. Put, short memory on that kind of, that's what you hope and come out well.
Cincinnati, by the way, 9-5 overall. Houston 8-6. Memphis and East Carolina are 7-7 and 9-5 respectively. So teams above 500, but teams that if UCF plays like they're capable of, they should be able to beat, certainly at home. So it's funny how, talked about this, you kind of take, any team that's playing UConn in the American, you almost have to, throw those games out and pretend that UConn doesn't exist in the conference in order to sort of gauge how actually good you are. We can debate about whether or not that's fair, but, they're right now sitting at 13-0, 1-0 in the league.
You could say that for the whole sport, though. I mean, that's not an American conference issue. That's a whole.
Strictly speaking, within the American, I mean, you kind of have to, if you're talking about the conference race, you kind of have to throw that out.
I think that I think there's some good teams in the American Conference that get overshadowed because UConn steamrolled through the conference.
Well, USF's 11-1 right now.
Right. Jose Fernandez, the coach, does a heck of a job there. So I think from the conference standpoint, what you're hoping is that these teams get better because UConn's in the conference, right? Because that's the recruiting pitch is you got a chance to play the best team in the country every year if you come here and play for X school here. And so I'm sure that's what Coach Abe's message will be to recruits is come to UCF. It's a great campus. It's in Orlando. You got a great education. And we can have a great arena. And you're going to be playing the best teams in the country because we've got UConn in our league. And that's got to be part of the sell.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to give some praise to Coach Abe for how that was handled. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit. We'll put a little wrap up on football and talk about the Americans' performance in bowl games. We got some breaking basketball news within the conference. Stick around. We'll be right back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret podcast.
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Fegley.
This is Trey Strelka with the UCF Nightline Podcast, the original, the #1 rated UCF sports podcast.
You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter, it's UCF_Nightline and at www.ucfnightlinepodcast.com.
Be sure to subscribe to us as well on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
And when you get sick of listening to these guys, make sure you look us up.
Don't forget, that's the UCF Nightline Podcast. Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now, back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
podcast.
And don't forget, I will join Trace and Andrew and Eric Kohler, by the way, for the live YouTube show on for UCF Nightline. That's this Sunday, 7 p.m., January 8th. So be on the lookout for that. Try and embed that up on our site and see if we can get that up there too. So, all right, little breaking basketball news, Eric. Orlando Antigua has been fired at the University of South Florida. Head men's basketball coach.
Wild, huh? Isn't that? I mean, I think there's some sanctions there that are probably coming towards USF, which is probably why you saw, the dismissal at this point in the year. They're not very good.
That's the main reason why. 23 and 55 in 2.5 seasons.
But I mean, they got rid of an assistant earlier in the year. There's some, infractions there, investigations. They're, probably going to go to probation. It's just a marvel at that because I've taught, if you remember, wow. I mean, when Donnie Jones got hired, Orlando Antigua was one of the main candidates for this job, the UCF job.
Yeah. He was an assistant under Coach John Calipari. He was kind of a hot name at the time. He'll be. By the way, he will be replaced on an interim basis by Murray Bartow, who's a first-year assistant and was previously a head coach at East Tennessee State. USF currently 6-7, 0-2 in the league. They don't play until Saturday against SMU, so they had some time to make that move.
And I want to bring that up because I like Donnie personally. I like Donnie. I'm happy with Johnny Dawkins. So don't get me wrong. I agreed with the move to move in a different direction. It wasn't working. But I know there was a lot of people that didn't like Donnie Jones in this, but I'm happy that we had Donnie Jones instead of Orlando Antigua because we might be in really trouble right now. And people.
Well, we had our own share of NCAA trouble under Donnie Jones.
Yeah, but in fairness to Donnie, that went up. That was above him too. I mean, Keith Tribble was involved in that kind of stuff. So when your boss is involved, like, what do you expect to happen? I mean, I'm not saying I understand it. Believe me, I understand it. It's unfortunate, but I just think some things didn't work out for Donnie, but it wasn't all bad. Especially at the beginning there, as I mentioned earlier with the Florida win in Amway, that you beat Connecticut in the Bahamas in the tournament. I mean, there were some positives and there were some winning seasons. It obviously tailed off, but it just that was what I reacted. I mean, that's what I think of when I heard the news today with Antigua gone, because I'm like, wow, because he was the name that a lot of people were speculating would end up at UCF at that time, and he did not. And, boy, we might be in even worse shape right now, maybe, if he was hired. And that's the one thing you got to be excited about, Coach Dawkins. You will not have any issues like that at all under Coach Dawkins. No way. That is the one guarantee I could definitely do there. And isn't it amazing? Johnny Dawkins has been here at a short period. He's only barely not even halfway through his first year. And UCF basketball is in better shape than USF basketball is right now, which is amazing to me since they've had their coach for 2.5, 3 years. UCF just got their new coach and they're in a better shape already.
Yep.
That's kind of mind boggling to me. Come to think about it. So, interesting to see what direction they go over there.
Already got a few names out there. Joey Knight, by the way. Tampa Bay, Joey Knight, TampaBay.com. 5 potential replacements on Tampa Bay Times. David Grace, UCLA assistant.
Okay, real quick about that. Keep in mind, the AD at USF used to work at UCLA.
Yep.
So that's the connection there. If you want to, Harlan used to be at UCLA, so that makes sense.
Here's an interesting name: Richard Pitino, Minnesota.
Richard, obviously,
son of Rick.
Of course, yeah. So you go from a Calipari disciple to literally a Pitino disciple.
They're 13-2 though this year, so they're like, why would you leave the Big Ten?
Well, that's a good question. Why would you leave Minnesota? Now the counter argument is that Minnesota, do they support him? Does he have the Minnesota support? They're giving him all the resources? Because remember, Tubby Smith there's been coaches that have left Minnesota. I agree with you though. the Big Ten, big-time conference in basketball. He's turned things around in Minnesota. Unless he doesn't have the support there, I don't see that happening. I agree.
Anthony Grant, assistant coach for the Oklahoma City Thunder and a former Billy Donovan lieutenant.
The guy that was
current Billy Donovan lieutenant, actually.
Anthony Grant. Well, that's funny he is because his world changed. His world changed when Billy Donovan. You remember when Billy Donovan was the head coach for the Orlando Magic for like 5 minutes about 8-9 years ago?
Right.
You know who Florida was going to get ready to bring in to replace him, right? It was going to be Anthony Grant.
Yeah.
Except Billy Donovan had a change of heart. So Grant never got that job. Grant, I believe, at the time was at VCU. He ended up going to Alabama. It did not work out there. I could see Grant because of the Florida ties, and I know he wants to get back into head coaching in college. He was another name that was speculated for the UCF job, I think, as recent as last year. Yeah. So,
by the way, pretty good record as a head coach, 193 and 110 in 3 NCAA tournaments in 9 seasons.
Most of that at VCU.
Yeah.
Bama had 1 year tournament. Bama, they kind of tell, although I think Alabama's kind of delusional over there. I don't think you can win there in basketball with all the resources going towards football, but that's just my opinion on that. But he's not bad. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Who else you got?
Obviously, the current interim coach, Murray Bartow. And here's a name that you know, Stan Jones, assistant at Florida State.
It's been there a long time under Leonard Hamilton. He hasn't taken any of the other jobs. You know, would he take that one? I don't know. Time will tell on that. That remains to be seen. I think the UCLA assistant makes a lot of sense because of the connections we talked about.
David Grace.
And, David Grace, and I could see Anthony Grant making sense there as well. Obviously, the other question is how much money is USF willing to put into their basketball program? We had this discussion when the UCF job was open last year. We talked about how part of it's not just coaching. It's about the resources that the basketball team. We talked about the lack of charter flights, for example, at the basketball team. That had to be addressed, which I believe it has, and stuff like that. So I'm sure those are similar issues USF has got to be dealing with, plus the lack of support they have over there. But it is interesting. USF's kind of going through what UCF did last year. Remember, they've just had their football coach change because Willie Taggart left for Oregon. They bring in Charlie Strong. Now they're going to have to go through a new basketball coach and who's going to have to probably pick up a mess. I mean, that program is probably a mess. So I don't know what they can draw as far as a coaching hire is concerned. That'll be very interesting.
Yeah. So, well, that's going to be fun to take a look at to see who USF hires. And well, here's hoping that they hire Isaiah Thomas.
And they're going to lose. I know that this is kind of a little bit off topic, but they're going to lose
right past my joke. I can't believe it.
That wasn't very good. That's why. They're going to lose their color analyst, the radio color analyst. You know who he is?
No.
Todd Callis, who, of course, was the host of the pregame of the Tampa Bay Rays. Well, he's moving on. He's going to be the play-by-play voice of the Houston Astros, from what I've been told. I think he's going to.
He's Harry Callis' son, is he not?
Correct. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And he's been doing radio analyst for USF basketball for a number of years. I always see him when USF comes to play UCF, and we talk. And I would assume, I think from what last I've heard, he will finish the year with USF, but obviously this will be it. USF comes to UCF, by the way, January 17th. So I look forward to seeing Todd Callis one last time before he heads out to Houston. So
good for Todd.
Absolutely. And of course, that'll be a game that'll impact the I-4 trophy. So,
yeah. So, all right, moving on from that, let's talk a little football. So last time you heard from us, we were talking, it was post of the Cure Bowl. And since then, that was actually, that was the second American Athletic Conference bowl game.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Since then, it hasn't gotten much better for the American. 2-5 is the record of the American in bowl games this year. The wins, Tulsa over Central Michigan in the Miami Beach Bowl, and USF defeating South Carolina in overtime in a thriller.
Yeah, they almost blew that game. Had a big lead, and they almost blew it.
Yeah, in the Birmingham Bowl. Losses by Houston to San Diego State in the Las Vegas Bowl by 24. Obviously, UCF getting clobbered by Arkansas State in Orlando in the Cure Bowl. Let's see. Memphis lost to Western Kentucky, and Jeff Brom, if I'm not mistaken, the head coach at in the Boca Raton Bowl.
Well, it was
That
the interim coach because Brom didn't
Brom
coach
left.
that
That's
game
right.
because he went to Purdue. So it was the interim coach that won that game. Yeah,
that's right. So let's see what Navy lost in a thriller to Louisiana Tech in the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl, which was in Fort Worth, and then in the Military Bowl, Temple in Annapolis lost to Wake by 8 points in a game that they just gave to Wake. I watched that game. They just handed it to Wake Forest. Bad year for the American in the bowl games, Eric. What do we make of that?
well, I think it's a combination. I think we always tend to overreact to conferences and bowl game records.
I agree, 150%.
I think that's part of it. And you look at the American; they're trying to push themselves as the Power Six. And I'll use Houston for example. Houston played Oklahoma this year, beat Oklahoma, beat Louisville. Now all of a sudden, your head coach leaves for Texas. Most of your staff leaves for Texas, and you're playing in Las Vegas. Your goal at the beginning of the year was to win the conference and maybe crash the party and make a playoff. That was their expectations, fairly or not, that they're unrealistic or not. That was what it was.
In September, that was certainly the goal.
Correct. Now all of a sudden you end up in Las Vegas against the San Diego State team that's very good, that's in the Mountain West, ready to go, and you got your interim coach. And here's what I think is going on with the American Conference. If you look at the bowl games you mentioned, except for Birmingham and Temple when they played Wake Forest, the rest of those matchups, the American Conference is going against other group of five conferences who I think are playing with a chip on their shoulder and are sick and tired of hearing about the American being the sixth best conference or being the group of six, et cetera. And I think what's happening here is a combination of certain schools in the American not being excited about that bowl matchup, and you're facing opponents that are geared up to play you to prove a point. And I think we've seen that repeatedly throughout the bowl season. We saw that with Arkansas State against UCF. We saw that. You mentioned Memphis losing to Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky's the Conference USA champion. They were geeked up to play Memphis.
That's a good program, Western Kentucky. They've been good year in and year out. People forget that.
So I think that's part of it, is that the American Conference has become a target when it comes to these bowl games. And I think, you had Temple with an interim coach, Houston with an interim coach. Those situations doesn't make it easy. Navy had some injury issues. They kind of slided at the end. And so I just think it's a
for the first time in 16 years.
Right. So I think it's a combination of things, and that's why the Americans at a 2-5. And I think that's the challenge for Mike Oresco moving forward is, A, can you get yourself some better tie-ins to where your programs could be excited to play in the bowl games, a destination? When UCF was in Conference USA, Jeff, the exciting thing was, hey, we win Conference USA, you're going to the Liberty Bowl and you're going to play a team from the SEC. That was that was the goal.
And we were the ones who had the chips on our shoulders.
Exactly.
Yep.
The issue that the American has is they've kind of set themselves up to be the favorites to make the power, the New Year's Day Six Bowl, right? That's the goal. The problem is, what if you don't get there? There's a rippling effect.
Then you're in no man's land.
Right. We've had success. The American has had success when they've hit the New Year's Six. UCF beat Baylor in the 2014 Fiesta Bowl. Houston beat Florida State. But what happens if you don't get there? So I feel there's a bit of a letdown from the top team that wins the conference but doesn't end up in the New Year's Six. You have coaches leaving, and then you're facing opponents in situations that are geared up to play you because they're tired of the lack of respect. All we keep hearing about is the American. Look at the Sun Belt. We had Danielle Jenkins on, right? Look how good the Sun Belt did. 4-2.
Yeah.
Now, is the Sun Belt better than the American? I don't believe so, but I think the Sun Belt, they're excited. They were motivated to play in all their bowl games, whereas I don't think the American was.
Yeah. Great segue, by the way. Talking about chips on shoulders, let us not forget who has the chip on the shoulder heading into the last college football game of the season. That would be the college football national championship, rematch of last year, Alabama and Clemson. The reason why I bring this up is because there are actually UCF connections to this game. For Alabama on the coaching staff, obviously we know that Brent Key, last year's offensive coordinator, more or less the coach in waiting under George O'Leary until the bottom fell out. He's an assistant coach under Nick Saban. He coaches the offensive line, specifically the guards and the centers. That puts him, given that Lane Kiffin has just been effectively dismissed as the offensive coordinator prior to this game and quarterback coach, so that he can focus on FAU. Yeah, right. Mario Cristobal, interestingly enough, the former FIU head coach, he's the assistant head coach. He coaches the tackles and the tight ends. He's also the recruiting coordinator. So Brent Key, Mario Cristobal, moving right on up the chain to Nick Saban, right? Also on the Alabama coaching staff, Ed Marinowitz. Remember him? He was a quarterback here at UCF. He was a backup quarterback. Got involved in player personnel, and he's the associate athletic director for football for Alabama. Actually came to Alabama after he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was the vice president of player personnel in 2015. Came down to be the to Alabama in June of 2016. So he's in his first year at Alabama. So glad to see that he's landed on his feet. And the other thing, another Orlando connection I wanted to point out too. Defensive line coach for Alabama, Carl Dunbar, who played for a long time in the NFL, but started his pro career. He went to LSU, by the way, but started his pro career with the Orlando Thunder in the World League. So just wanted to point that out. Brent Key, Ed Marinowitz, laughing all the way to the championship game on Monday against Clemson. By the way, now you mentioned chips on the shoulders. I think Clemson's got a chip on their shoulder in this game. I don't know about you, but I like the Tigers. Where are you at?
Whoa, Mr. You used to be Mr. Anti-Clemson. Wow.
I there's just something about you talked about this, right? The chip on the shoulder.
Yep.
They've been waiting for this game for a whole year. They still don't think Dabo Swinney and in particular Deshaun Watson, Gainesville High School graduate, they look at last year's game and say, we didn't lose that game. We ran out of time. Now, whether or not you believe that is another thing. The difference is they believe that.
No, I agree. I hear you. I'm with you. I have Clemson as well. Now, let me also, there is a couple UCF connections with Clemson.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
One indirectly, one directly. One, I'm going to start directly. In the administrative side, Joe Simon used to be in the administrative side at UCF, oversaw softball, among other things, while he was at UCF. He's over at Clemson now. He's been there now for the last couple of years, so he's over there. I actually congratulated him after their win over Ohio State on Twitter. Always got along with him, so certainly hope for the best for him. He's doing a good job over there at Clemson.
And we'll pass along word to
Joe, right?
Yeah, we know Joe. Joe was at UCF when I was there, so hey, congrats to Joe.
So we have him, and then indirectly, Tucker Israel is a quarterback at Clemson. He's deep on the depth chart. His cousin, of course, Kyle Israel, former quarterback at UCF. In fact, I think Kyle is hoping, because I spoke with Kyle recently, and I think with Clemson winning and going to play in Tampa, I would suspect that Kyle will be able to attend that game.
Yeah, I heard that. In fact, I heard that he was going to be down there along with the family. So
so that's great for them.
A big moment for the Israel family. So good for them.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting for them. Should be exciting there. Here's my question here. Here's the big question. Okay. If you're a UCF fan, are you rooting against Brent Key? Yeah. Well, no, I'm saying, are you more specifically Brent Key? Let's be honest. Let's focus on Brent Key because obviously Brent Key was just here. He was last year. If things would have gone differently, he'd be the head coach right now at UCF. So I'm wondering, will UCF fans root against Alabama because of Brent Key? Will some of them root for Brent Key or indifferent? Because I'm very interested in that. I think there's some people that still have hard feelings with how things ended and the fact that Brent Key had a coach in waiting in his deal, basically. I think that's very fascinating. And how are UCF fans going to feel if Alabama wins and Brent Key will be showing has a national championship ring?
I think most UCF fans are like, I don't care, water under the bridge. I think the only people who are going to be actively rooting against Alabama because of Brent Key are the internet trolls. I mean, that's really it. They're just going to, Brent Key's the worst ever, and I hope they lose by 50. Okay, whatever. I've met Brent more than a few times and talked to him a few times. I want Brent to have success. I mean, the whole thing about the coach in waiting thing. I mean, whatever. I mean, that is what it is. That happens everywhere. It's just that it's proximity to us that makes it hurt a little bit more. Him being the offensive coordinator. Look, that whole season did not go well. Okay, but
yeah,
but let's say, I mean, if you know these guys personally, you're like, hey, you know what? I hope he wins. I hope that at least he has success. I think Clemson's going to win. I'm not going to be sad if they don't. I think that, and if Brent and Ed too, if they win a national championship in their first year in Alabama, good for them. It's rare that you get to get one of those rings. It's not like those guys didn't work hard to get where they were. I mean, sometimes you work hard and you have a great season like we had in 2013. Other times you work hard and you go 0-12. What can I say? I mean, I hope he's successful.
Right. That's the thing. Well, people let that go because Brent Key was part of the staff of the most successful UCF football team of all time in 2013. So there were positives, but it didn't end well. So it's going to be interesting. How much will people hold that against him? I mean, he took a beating last year as the offensive coordinator. So I'm very interested in that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm very curious. I mean, look, I think the majority of the country is rooting for Clemson, and I would assume that will be the case at UCF fans anyway, just because nothing to do with Brent. It just, people are tired of Alabama winning. People are always tired of teams that win all the time. So I think that's the case in sports.
We want Bama.
I just wonder, because I know there are people that still, hold a grudge because of Brent with the coach in waiting situation, and they feel they held the program back. I'm not one of them. I don't have a problem. I don't have a bone to pick with him. I'm actually friends. I've been friendly with his wife. I know his wife very well, going back a day. So I hope them a lot of success, and I hope them happiness, really. But I don't know. I'm very curious to see kind of the reaction and what the reaction will be either way.
I don't know. I think if you're like intentionally rooting against Brent Key because you think that he somehow screwed the program over, it's like, go outside and take a walk.
Since we're talking about, by the way, sure. No, I agree. We'll see. I'm just very interested to see how that goes with them. So, since we're talking about former people that worked at UCF, by the way, I'm just going to throw this shout out. Former UCF graduate Matt Dunaway, former voice of softball, is an SID at Men's Texas Tech, upsetting West Virginia at home. Shout out to them. Why not? If we're going to give shout outs to former UCF alums, right? Let's go.
Shout out to the Red Raiders. Shout out to the Red Raiders and Matt Dunaway beating West Virginia at home tonight. So, all right. As we wrap up here on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, our first edition back in the new year 2017. Lopez, what do you have on tap this week?
Well, actually, keep it here on the Black and Gold website here. Go check it out. I've got an exclusive interview with former UCF All-American softball pitcher Shelby Turnier. I had a 2-part interview with her, and we discussed a lot. Speaking of which, she's now an assistant coach at North Florida with the Ospreys. We talked about
Atlantic Sun Conference.
Yeah. We talked about how she ended up there, why she go into coaching. She's going to be coaching there. North Florida will play UCF this year. So I asked her about what's that going to be like. She also won an MPF championship this past year with the Chicago Bandits, winning the title. So we talked about that, and then she reflected on a UCF career. So she transcended the program. She brought a lot of fans. So for Knight fans, want to check out Shelby Turnier, my interview with her. I wrote about her summer and stuff, including comments from her general manager of the Chicago Bandits and Aaron Moore, who compared her to Kat Osterman and Jenny Finch in some of her ways that she pitches in big games. You want to read that quote. It's kind of what jumps out there. So really good article and with the audio links to that. You can hear the in-depth interview. It's a 2-parter. So check that out here on Black and Gold on the website as well.
Yep, right here on blackandgoldbanneret.com. And I am actually working on some statistical analyses of the 2016 UCF football season and trying to compare over the last 5 years some more or less advanced, some advanced metrics. It's taken me a little while, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there step by step. So be on the lookout for that as well. So that'll do it for us. Make sure you make sure you follow us on Twitter for all the latest at UCF_Banneret. Follow us on Facebook as well, Black and Gold Banneret, and at blackandgoldbanneret.com. Subscribe to this podcast and rate us if you haven't yet on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and TuneIn Radio. You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon and follow you, Eric Lopez, at
Eric Lopez Elo. You can find out all my latest developments as well. Of course, over at 1080 in Orlando, doing that all the time. So you can just follow. That's the easiest way. Just go to Twitter, find out what I'm doing, among other things, when I'm not here at the podcast.
All right, cool. Sounds good, brother. Good to be back in 2017. Have you blown any of your resolutions yet?
Oh, I'm sure I've done it. Yeah, there's. I mean, whatever. Yeah, it's done, man. We got one or two done.
I've already screwed this up. I'm staying up too late. I wanted to go for a run tomorrow morning, but I'm not going to do it. It'll have to happen.
Good luck with that. Yeah, good luck with it.
All right, Elo. Good talking to you, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Jeffrey.
And thanks to those of you listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Stay on the website for some more content this week, and we will catch you again next week on the show.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.